So welcome to the Future of Power. My name is Judy Rogers, and for the next little while, we're going to be talking about enlightened leadership. There has never been a time when we more desperately needed wise leadership. And this has been the mission of Future of Power since it started in 2009. To engage those who are willing to lead in these times in a deep conversation about what wise leadership looks like in an unprecedented time like ours. The Future of Power dialogues have been hosted all this time by Nizar Juma, a leader with over 50 years as what he calls an industrialist, who has a committed inner practice. So I'd like to introduce Nizar Juma. Nizar, you need to unmute.
Okay.
There you are. Welcome.
Okay, excuse me. So hello everyone and welcome. If I were to ask some of you, why are you here today? Quite a number of you might say because we saw the word power in the Future of Power. And these days, everybody wants to know more about power. Everybody wants power. If you have power, you want even more power. So power is something that we need to talk about a little bit because that's our title, The Future of Power. Even countries have power. World power also is dominated by some countries. And until about 2,500 years ago, world power was in Bharat, India, as it was then called. When it was there, they were ruled by benevolent kings. And the kings cared for their people. And so it was what we call soft power. They took care of their people, every need. As power went from that to other countries, it moved from India to, not necessarily in the order in which I'm saying, but it went to Egypt, it went to China, went to Spain, went to Rome, it went to Great Britain when they told us that the sun didn't set on their empire. And today it is in the United States of America. But in the process, this power became harder and harder. And today it's really hard power. And the definition of power today is how much money we have and how many guns and bombs do we have. That is the definition of hard power today. So we are talking about soft power. Can we bring soft power in our daily lives? Soft power is also termed as spiritual power. My own experience was that I went into business when I was 23 years old. I did some major deals by the time I was 29. I was running 3 companies. At the age of 35, I got ulcers. I was drinking alcohol like it was going out of fashion. I had 5 to 6 nights a week commitments socially. I had ignored my family, and that was the cost of what I was doing. At the age of 48, I found soft power, enlightenment, spiritual power. I then became civilized. And when I explain to you what that means, civilized means, my kids told me, we don't know what you are doing, but whatever it is, please don't stop, because they were amazed at the change that they saw in me. I was learning how to cope with stress. I was dropping anger. And most importantly, I was able to handle considerably more without stress. I was handling 3 companies before I started to handle up to 60, 70 companies, of which I am and was the chairman. Now, these benefits we have to explain to you in greater detail. But when we see the benefit, people like me, and there are lots of others who see the benefit of this, then they want to share this with the others. So in 2009, we got a few of us got together, and we started what we call the Future of Power. We went to cities after cities. This is our 71st program. And we have done these programs in India, in Nepal, in Australia, in the Philippines, in Africa, and in America. And each program, or dialogue as we call it, we go through the process of discussing whether we can bring soft power or spiritual power into our lives and what benefit we would get from that. What's happening in the world today is so strongly violent and strongly traumatic that we have lost all power against it. What do we do? There is loss, there is sadness, there is anxiety, there is fear. How do we cope with this? And more people are beginning to realize that we have to become eternally powerful. And how do we do that? We have to bring internal power or spiritual power within us so that we are able to cope with what's going on. Meditation is one of the tools. I'm not saying it's the entire answer, but it's one of the tools. Today, all successful people, or majority of the successful people, go and look them up in Google. They will tell you that they are doing some method of meditation. Major hospitals are now adopting meditation as a cure. Schools are now teaching meditation. In Harvard, meditation is a major pastime. So I can give you lots and lots of examples, but important thing is that meditation is a must. It's no longer something that you do because you think, let's see if it's going to help me. Meditation is something that makes you internally powerful. That's one of the things. But the spiritual power that I'm talking about is it's a package. It's a number of things that we will discuss a little bit later. But it is also about higher consciousness. It's about soul consciousness or soul power. A friend of mine has written a book called Soul Power, and which is very, very detailed about what soul power is all about. My 2 guests today also have higher consciousness. One has demonstrated it in very critical situations, and I'm sure that we are going to discuss that. And the other one is trying to get the United Nations to adopt higher consciousness as one of their SDGs. Everybody needs to be internally powerful by adopting this higher consciousness. I wanted to introduce this to you. I have a little time because I want this program to demonstrate to you our two guests and what they do with their higher consciousness. So I will hand you over back to Judy. Thank you, Judy.
Thank you, Nizar. So you've been hearing about these two guests. So let's meet these guests. These two are leaders who not only talk about conscious leadership, but who have committed their lives to principled action. Their stories are fascinating. So I'd like to start by introducing you to Amandine Roche, a human rights lawyer who has dedicated her life to peace building and to women's empowerment. Amandine is currently in Bangui in the Central African Republic. And the second guest is Alain Desvigne, co-founder and CEO of the Amarenco Group, a leading solar photovoltaic infrastructure investment company based in Ireland. He's speaking to us today from Nice, France. Welcome to you both.
Good evening.
Now, to those of you in the audience, throughout this dialogue, please feel free to put your questions or comments in the chat box that's at the bottom of your screen. I'm not walking you through Zoom because I can't believe there's anyone left on the planet who isn't deeply familiar with Zoom. But at the bottom of your screen, there's a little chat box. You can open that up and send us a message or a question or whatever, and we'll respond to that. So, Alain. How are you?
Very good, thanks, Judy.
So your life work is about building sustainability at every level. We have a pretty good idea of what sustainability looks like in business, but what does sustainability look like in a personal life? Maybe in your personal life?
Okay, so good evening, and thank you very much for the introduction, especially from Nizar. It was a very touching introduction about, let's say, a reorientation of how we use power to do good. And I love the idea of empowering, which you described very well. So sustainability, maybe the best way to start is, instead of let's say, speaking about my own experience with sustainability, is maybe to run a short experiment, if you allow me to do so. Sure. It's gonna last just 30 seconds, very short, but I think it's gonna give you a flavor of my definition of sustainability. So I'll invite everyone to close their eyes if they're willing to do so, and I'll give one word. And with that word, you'll visualize what the word resonates with you. So what really brings you in terms of inner resonance, and what do you picture with that word? So if you're okay, so just close your eyes very softly. And I'll give you the word nature. What is the first picture that comes to your mind? All right, so you can reopen your eyes. I do this in every workshop I run around meditation. And I think I've been running this for the past 5 years, and I've run some statistics, so I'm happy to share them with you. And since we are online, we have less interaction that is possible. So the results are the following ones. In 90% of the cases, people picture trees and greenery like you can see in my background right now. Rarely they see solar panels, of course, but they see a greenery. The second tranche is usually around water bodies, rivers, lakes, oceans, waterfalls. That's usually representing 5, 6, 7% on average. Then there's a third category of people, much more rare. Basically, they picture the desert, the mountains, other elements of nature, but very, very, very rarely animals. That happens, but very rarely. I've only come across, out of 20,000 people I had with in terms of workshop, one person who told me I have visualized one human being, or even himself or herself, as part of nature. So that illustrates somehow how far we have separated ourselves from nature. We don't see ourselves as being part of nature. We are part from nature, but we are not a part of nature. And for me, sustainability is really around that. It is really around dissolving that man-made separation, this man-made boundary. And somehow this is probably also the reason you see more and more people going out to the countryside, relocating to the rural areas, because they want to be closer to the forest, to the greenery. They want to be closer to the pace of nature, to be more in tune with nature. At the same time, it's a bit, let's say, a pity, because running away from other people is also running away from nature. So somehow, for me, sustainability is around integration. The best way I can really describe sustainability is integration. It is unifying. Every time you integrate first yourself, then integrate yourself within your family, within your community, and you go on, you're basically really contributing to building a sustainable life, a sustainable world. So for me, that's the best way I can describe that sustainability is not only about developing a sustainable model of development for the society in terms of types of infrastructures we do, in terms of type of economy we develop, but it is really a mindset of integration and of dissolving this man-made separation from nature.
That I've never heard that definition of sustainability before. That's really interesting. So then when you apply it in your personal life, it has to do with integrating yourself in your family, your town, is that what you're saying? Is there
Yes.
a concrete example of that you can give us?
Yeah, I mean, I'll give you an example. As maybe the first one is, of course, family. So the way I live is probably not an usual way of living in France. Probably more a model that you can see sometimes in Italy. I've seen it in India for sure. I've lived it also in Georgia, in southern Russia, where basically I live in a house where we are 3 generations. My parents, 95, 96, my wife, my children. So we are all living in the same house. We have some private space, some common space, and we all share and learn to live together for the worst and for the best. And that lifestyle, which is really trying to integrate that diversity of generation, that diversity of age that we're going through. When you're 95, my father now is in the last part of his life. He's in his bed now all the time. It's a different step. And when you're exposed to all these facets of life, it's very much, I would say, nourishing as well. Because at the end, the ability to integrate a family, it goes through the heart. And you're sharing the moments of joy and the moments of sorrow. That is also integration. And that makes life also very intense and very meaningful. So I'm very grateful that somehow that aspect of not being separated from the different part of the family, but being able to live in the same shelter is something which is for me very, very touching. And I think that I've seen it hands-on once in Tbilisi. I was staying with a family. They had only 2 rooms. One room was two sisters, the brother, the mother. They were living sleeping in one room all together. And then the second room was the rest of the day for the kitchen, for sitting together, eating together, celebrating together. And that family really touched my heart very much. And somehow I felt that is a perfect example of a sustainable family life. And probably, I would say, surely, that they were very well prepared for confinement. So that's that's what I can say around
That's
sustainability.
beautiful. That's really beautiful. So I would imagine a lot of people would find that really enviable something they'd love to have. And there may be some people who think, no way, there is just no
Yeah,
way.
yeah.
But this means that your children will be with their grandfather as he passes, right?
Yes, they will also experience what means death, which is part of life.
Mhm.
So it's
Mhm.
also a dimension of it.
Wow, that's beautiful. Well, so you weren't born wanting to dedicate yourself to renewable energy, right? It
Yes,
wasn't the
that's
first
correct.
thing that happened. How did you get there? What made you decide to dedicate yourself to renewable energy?
Actually, I was very much involved to begin with water. I don't know why, but I always had this. I was born in Africa, actually in Gabon. I spent the first 3 years of my life near the sea, and probably this has influenced me very deeply in terms of my attraction to water. So I was very much into water management. I studied very early water management, water infrastructures, and I dedicated the first part of my career to water. So water desalination, water recycling, water wastewater treatment. So it was all about building sustainable water infrastructures. And then I wanted to expand, let's say, my education background. So I went through an MBA at INSEAD, which was a fantastic year in Singapore. And then I had the opportunity to shift from water to renewable energy. It was back in 2006, 2007. And it was very closely related because, two fundamental needs in life are energy and water. And you don't have water without energy. You don't have energy without water. They are very much interlinked and they are very fundamental as much as food. And so I went to then shift to renewable energy, and somehow with giving a career a meaningful impact, where the capital that you deploy is not only dedicated to shareholder value, it's part of it. Shareholder value is part of the economy or the mode that or the type of society we work in, but not only shareholder value, but all other aspects of the environment in which we live. So being able to really contribute to reduce carbon footprints, being able to protect the climate, protect the environment. So creating a job that is very meaningful and very impactful was for me really critical, and that was kind of the common thread from water to solar energy.
Hmm. So, so renewable energy is not just about shareholder value, and you're talking about, again, you're talking about integration, right?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, when you have to make decisions today, in organizations, as leaders, as especially C executives, you definitely have to take into consideration shareholder value. But if you're only focusing on shareholder value, you have the world that we have today. And clearly, I would say you have to take into account the long-term value that you're creating as an organization in the world, and it has to take that mindset, which is whatever you do, you don't separate yourself from nature. You really act as if you're part of nature, and therefore you care for environment, you care for the climate, you care for the people you're working with. I really love the idea or the concept that Nizar brought in early on when he said, back then the kings were benevolent. They had more care for the people, for their people, than for themselves. So it's a concept of being selfless. And of course, when you have power and you use it, where you have that in your consciousness, in the back of your mind, then I think you can really contribute to making this world, let's say, sustainable for future generations.
So part of it is integration, part of it is benevolence, it sounds like, in both of your examples. Living at home, part of what makes that work with your three generations is there's a kind of benevolence or goodwill that you have. And it's the same thing when you're talking about shareholder value. And kings, benevolent kings. I was actually in Bhutan a few years ago for the king's birthday, and it was splendid. Everyone marched around this big auditorium. We love our king. It's the kind of king you're talking about, this great benevolence, taking care of people.
Yes.
So how does this connect? You've done something that's beginning to draw quite a bit of attention, which is you have proposed that if the UN wants these 17 Sustainable Development Goals to work, that they need to adopt an 18th goal. And you're saying it's the first goal, actually. It's not number 18, it's number 1. So what brought you to this proposal, and where are you at this point with this suggestion?
Yes. The starting point was an invitation to a conference a year ago, and it was in India in a top-ranking business school in Asia called Indian Institute of Management in Bangalore. And I was invited because that event was co-organized by the IIM of Bangalore and the Heartfulness Institute. And I'm part of that, let's say, spiritual movement. And I was invited to give a lecture on, or let's say, a conference on sustainability, and at the same time to write an article around it. And then I thought, if I try to reconcile the two things which are very dear to my life, I would say one is basically career, where basically the job in which I work, which is really contributing to the Sustainable Development Goals, and basically the underlying vision behind the 17 United Nations SDGs, as we call them, is basically to create and peace and prosperity for all human beings on this planet. And if you look at the 17 goals, so in my work field, we contribute to number 7, which is access to clean energy. And I was aware that we were very, very far away in terms of reaching these goals. The goals that are set up by 2030, so another 10 years, we are very far away in the following ways. Number one, there is a shortfall of $2.5 trillion in terms of capital allocation. We can see that less than one CEO out of 2 has even started to put sustainability on their own agenda for the organization, for their operations. Number 3, we've seen that poverty is not reducing. Hunger has increased by the 3rd year in a row. So basically, I would say, on none of the 17 goals, we're getting there. And then if you look at that fact, and the second element, which is my involved in meditation, and where I started quite young as a teenager, I realized through practice that when you meditate, it's not enough to know that you need to change, because otherwise the world will be very different today. You need to go through a shift of consciousness. If you don't do the shift of consciousness, any change attempt is failing. And knowledge is really not enough, because I think people now are really aware that we have an impact on the climate, we have an impact on the environment. Everyone wants, I'm sure, the good things that are in the UN SDGs, but they're not simply happening. And I think it's because somehow knowing is not enough, and a shift of consciousness is necessary. And what I've seen for myself is that every time in my life, whether it's career, family, or personal, I had to make a change, and it was supported by meditation through shift of consciousness. And that's why I came up with this concept, an invitation to the UN to say, if you're not getting there, it's because we need to deploy the tools. One meditation is one tool, as my friend Nizar said, but there are maybe many others who are there to realize this shift of consciousness, to really bring people in, saying every time, every action we take, every decision we make has an impact and can have an impact. And when you change the plan of consciousness, you're able to really do it. So that was the idea of an 18th Sustainable Development Goal.
Wow, interesting. Okay, so let's shift here. I want to bring in Amandine. Amandine, it seems that our lives make a certain kind of sense when we look back at them, but often there is a defining moment that changes everything that happens afterwards. And for you, the first such moment was, from what I understand, meeting the Dalai Lama when you were 18. Can you briefly describe that meeting? What was it that he said or did that you found so inspiring?
Thank you very much, Judy, and thank you to Nizar and Alain. I really appreciate listening to their wisdom. Yeah, what happened? Very simple. I decided to study law because I just wanted to serve. And I was lucky enough because His Holiness the Dalai Lama came to my university when I was 18, and he came to speak about the violation of human rights in Tibet and the non-violent resistance of the Tibetan. And also the fact that they were able to be non-violent because they were meditating every single day and connected to prayer. And I found his speech fascinating, and it resonates deep within myself, that I decided just afterward that I will commit myself for human rights, for democratization, and to join United Nations. And I went to visit him in Dharamsala, Himachal Pradesh, McLeod-Ganj, north of India, for the one listening in India. And I met him again, and I remember in his temple, I saw a poster about the youngest prisoner in the world, Gending Shoeki Niyama, Panchen Lama, kidnapped by the Chinese. And I realized that I was studying human rights, but I never heard about him. And during the night, I made a dream that I need to go back to France and investigate on that. So I wrote my political science thesis on the Panchen Lama on the violation of human rights in Tibet. And after completing my master's degrees in international relations, I decided to join United Nations. My dream was to bring back the Dalai Lama to Tibet. I couldn't do it, of course, very naive at this time, but I joined UNICEF first in Uzbekistan and after in Tajikistan. And afterward, I got fascinated by the Afghan because of the situation in Afghanistan at this time.
Well, so that brings us to this second life-defining moment. I have to say, you really took action on your first moment. Not everyone jumps on a plane and goes to Dharamsala. That says a lot about who you were even then. So, okay, second life-defining moment was that day in 2014. You were at the polling station in Afghanistan, witnessing the lines of women who had come to cast their very first vote for president. And so tell us what went on inside of you when you saw that a suicide bomber was poised to blow himself up at that polling station. Tell us what happened next.
Thank you, Judy. And what happened before, because it was in 2000 when I was helping the refugees in Tajikistan, and I fell in love with Afghan, which I decided to go to visit Afghanistan. And it happened, I came to Afghanistan on September 11, and my second life change experience, and when I got detained and exchanged by Taliban. Then when I left Afghanistan for Pakistan, there was a small girl at the border asked me to save her, and I couldn't save her. And surprisingly, she came in my dream asking me why you didn't save my life. And she really woke up my consciousness about the situation of these people. And I promised myself, I'm going to come back and I'm going to work for democratization, human rights, and women empowerment. So I came back in 2003. And since then, I commit myself for this country and other democratization process around the world. And indeed, in 2014, when I was monitoring election for the presidential election in Afghanistan, I went to a polling station, and indeed I felt something was very bizarre. I'm pretty intuitive thanks to my practice on yoga meditation for many years now, and it developed even more my intuition, and even more I can feel the vibration of the energy of people. And when I came to this polling station, indeed, I felt something was off, something was cold, something was kind of relating to death. And I took the picture and I felt on my left side something very, very dark. And when I turned to look at what's going on, I saw a person as tall as me, as a woman, but Afghan woman. I'm 180 meters, so and 1 meter 80. So means I'm pretty tall, and the woman was as tall as me, which is not possible enough. I didn't never see that in Afghanistan. And when I look at the person, I saw the person was waiting for something, and so I ran away. I was very scared because the person was not interacting in a nice way and pretending to be official. So I had a bodyguard at this time. So he ran after me, asking me what's going on. And I saw him, but I was scared by something I saw in the polling station. So he came inside, but he couldn't enter because he was a man and it's only for women. But he looked at it, and when he saw the person, he said, "Oh my gosh, pretty intense. Please be careful. I don't know what's going on here." So I came back to the police station and I asked my intuition, I asked my inner voice, who is this person? And I heard, "That's a suicide bomber." And I couldn't believe it. I was pretty sure it was, but I didn't want to hear its answer. When I heard that, I ran away like I never run so fast in my life. And more I was running, more my inner voice was telling me, no, you have to go back. You have to go back to smile at him. And I heard him and not her, like. And so it was a confirmation that this person was disguised as a woman, but who is full of explosive under a coat. And so I stopped because I asked myself, who is talking to me right now? Because obviously it's not me. I'm super scared and I just want to save my life and I just want to run away. And I keep on doing that. And my bodyguard came again and said, "What's going on again?" I said, "Well, I'm super scared. This person is making me freaking out." And I cool down. I do breathing exercise. I connect to my inner voice. My inner voice was shouting at me, "You have to go back now." And I understand now why, because 5 minutes after, the polling station was about to open to 300 women waiting outside under the rain. And of course, the best time to blow itself. So I came back and the inner guidance was telling me, "You have," and I was super curious. I can feel the bad vibes. And it's like, for me, remind me Auschwitz in Poland, this concentration camp. When I went in the gas chamber, it was the same time of bad vibes. And I went close to this person. And when I tried to look, the person was like, not here. And I went closer and closer and finally face. And when I saw his eyes, I can see he was full of substance, like completely under drug. And I understand why. And I say, "Okay, what I'm doing now?" And then I just like smile 3 times. He couldn't connect, and finally connect. And he smiled, and he had a beautiful smile. I remember the smile was amazing. And surprisingly, I understood afterward why he did that is to reconnect to the small consciousness within himself, to connect to his heart, to come back to humaneness. And it just like he woke up from what he was about to do, commit, and look at me and smile, and really understood that I understood who he is and what he was doing. And I told him, like, "You get out." And surprisingly, maybe it was because he was under drug, he took out the official jacket, opened the door, and went out. And I was super scared afterward because I realized, oh my gosh, I'm bringing a suicide bomber in the middle of this 300 women. So I scream in English, "Be careful, it's going to blow," like for the woman, but the woman don't understand English. And I didn't say in Pashto or Dari. Anyway, he never did that. He never came back. But I got traumatized. And again, I'm talking about dream. The first time when I met with Dalai Lama and I made a dream, I need to go to a Dharamsala. The second dream, I dreamed about this small girl at the border asking, "What you did in Safi?" I came back to Afghanistan. And in this dream he was coming back, his eyes, and freaked me out so much that I say, it's time for me to leave Afghanistan after 14 years on and off, working for democratization, human rights, and women empowerment.
That's a great story. You've probably told that story 300 times, and it's riveting every time. It sounds like there's 2 yous. There's the you that is terrified, and then there's the you who's talking inside. That's really interesting. the one who's dreaming and talking, and then the one who's saying, no, let me get out of here. I mean, that is really interesting, this intuitive thing. And I think we'll come more to that later. But it's fascinating the way that you describe this inner dialogue that you're in. It's really very interesting. All right, so you're in the Central African Republic right now working on women's empowerment. Is that right? And
Correct.
I'm curious, what happens for you inside when you meet these women? I mean, it feels to me like you are quite moved by those you serve. And so I'm wondering, what happens to you inside when you meet, for example, these women in a place like this?
That's a good question. And just to finish about the inner voice, I realize the problem is our inner voice, inner guidance, the source, the God, you call it as you want, is always very soft. And our ego is so loud. So meditation
That's
really helps us to increase the volume,
Mm.
of our inner voice.
That
And
goes
so
with
to
what
answer your
Nizar said about soft power, right? Your soft voice is
exactly,
what does the soft power. Yeah.
exactly the soft power. And actually, I realized that this is what I like about women in general when I'm meeting all around the world, and especially here in Central Africa. I really connect with them because they went through so much pain, so much suffering. It's maybe the worst place in the world to be a woman. It's the poorest country in the world. 80% of the country is covered by rebels. We are at the age of a civil war because there will be election in 3 weeks. I do hope, I touch wood, nothing will happen, but it's a very volatile environment. There's a big culture of rape. It's like they consider it sexual education, but all the small girls are raped at 13, 14. And there is genital mutilation, early marriage, and also sexual abuse, prostitution. So it's a very tough place to be a woman because it's a poor country. And so they don't empower women, they don't have financial independence, and it's difficult for them to be a leader or to participate to political participation. So the job we are doing with United Nations, with UN Women here, is really to help women to empower themselves in the sense to heal them from the trauma of the rape first, and second to give them some training to make them independent financially, economical empowerment, and finally helping them to become a leader. And we're helping women right now to do their electoral campaign and to do a legislative election. And yes, to be part of a legislative election.
But what happens to you? So I see what you do for them, and it's quite powerful. And I see why you're actually quite a kind of an inspiring leader in this role of women's empowerment. But what goes on for you? What happens to you inside when you're engaging with them to try to bring them onto their feet and give them the confidence and strength and power?
You know, we were talking about soft power before. Nizar mentioned that soft power is the future of power. And for me, soft power is when you connect to your feminine values of love, of peace, of joy, of compassion, of beauty and grace, harmony or intuition. And soft power is also, and is to answer your question, this is what I asked to the woman. It's conscious leadership because I ask them, what do you really care about? What gives you joy and what makes you alive? Because I do believe what the world needs more than ever right now is people fully alive and fully awake. And this is true leadership, actually. And it's about shining your light and authentically. And it's about clarifying your passion. For instance, Alain's got a passion on sustainable development and recycle energy and nature. And so when you find your passion, like we can see with Alain, you really inspire her to do your best, and you inspire yourself to be a better leader, and you get clear on what you truly value in life, and so you are aware, you are awake, and you are tuned to your intuition, and you put people first in life, and you foster kindness and collaboration and co-creation, and you see people because you are fully here and now. And you can really listen, you can really hear, you can really see the people, and you help people to thrive and be here and far away from drama and stress. So this is what we do. We help them we give them a safe place to heal first, and fully find who they are at the soul level, and fully embrace it and develop this gift.
Okay, that's beautiful. So I want to come back. I want to bring Nizar into our conversation. Bring him back. So Nizar, you said earlier that as a younger man, you weren't a very nice leader. Now, I happen to know you as an older man, and you're a very nice leader. Something changed. You spent the last part of your working life leading many companies for the Aga Khan. So what happened? What happened that changed the kind of leader you are? And maybe the kind of man that you are?
Yes, I think that you've hit the nail on the head when you say I was not a very nice leader. I don't think I was a very nice person. And I think that, all our values were misdirected. And whereas today we are fighting for non-corruption and doing all of those kind of things, everything was gain in my younger days. I think that I've done it all. And I think, as I said, when I became civilized, it is that I had a change in my consciousness. I learned about what is really important in life. I slowly also stopped making money for money and did most of the things on a voluntary basis. All this sort of brings a change in you, and the fact that you are becoming and adopting a more spiritual life. I still belong to the corporate world. I mean, I live with them, I work with them. Even today, I go into the corporate world every day. And yet, I am able to do things differently from them. And also try to see if we can get them to see more and more of our ways. Because this inner voice that Amandine is talking about is something that is cultivated in all of us as we do this practice of meditation. I think that all of us do different kind of meditation. I do Raj Yoga meditation. She's doing yoga meditation. So all of us do different kind of meditation, but we go inward. And as we go inward, all of us who are souls, our soul is stationed here, we become more and more soul conscious, which is what I have become. And so I think that we go away from this idea that you need to sit in a corner somewhere and sit in a certain way and meditate. You can meditate with your eyes open, and you can meditate whenever and wherever you are. And I think that way also you are able to influence the environment around you, the people around you, and all of those kind of things. This kind of change that comes into you makes this the most important thing in your life. I'm mesmerized when I am listening to Amandine, although I've heard the story before. But each time, I think because she is opening her inner self to us. And I think that as we become more and more soul conscious, all of us are able to be more open and more open about who we are and what we need to do. Of
You know,
people.
this is interesting, this thing you're saying about influence. I want you to talk about that a little bit, and then I want to go to the other two. So you didn't become more conscious and then go sit on a mountain and eat bark or whatever. I mean, you went back, you said, I'm still in the corporate life, I'm still engaged. And Alain is still very clearly in the world of energy, renewable energy. It's clear that Amandine is still very active in all the things she's cared about. So it's like this conversion of some sort happens inside, but there's no withdrawal that I'm hearing from any of you. You're talking about influence. Say just a little more about the kind of influence you are trying to have.
So, for example, you know that all the companies I chair or I have anything to do with, we make sure that they follow best practices, they pay all their taxes, that we are completely devoid of any corruption whatsoever. And so this influence is very solid in everything that we do. But we cannot do all of those things and lead our companies to rack and ruin. We also have to lead successful companies because all of us are judged by our bottom line, which must be solid. So, for example, in our largest insurance company, of which I'm the chairman and which is a publicly listed company, we have zero tolerance for corruption, and yet we are number one. So people who say that, you know, in a corrupt environment, you cannot survive without corruption, then we are demonstrating. And this we are able to do because our viewpoint, our aims are pure. And so we get success as a result of that in the right direction. We have started something called a Blue Company Project, in which people are now joining to become corruption free. And since 1.5 years, we've already got 500 companies, serious companies, who have joined us, and we are expanding this to other countries in Africa.
So it's sort of the integration that Alain was talking about, right? You can't abandon the bottom line, but you're sort of integrating a different consciousness. And I want to ask Alain, leaders have so much information pouring in all the time. In order to keep this bottom line going, as Nizar is saying, they have so many external data points. What allows them to make clear decisions? In other words, how do we bring this small, quiet voice that Amandine was talking about to the decision-making and leadership?
Well, the answer is in your question. If you want to hear the, let's say, if you want to call it the inner voice, you have to still the mind. You have to remove the background noise, and somehow that's the beauty of techniques which are like meditation, where basically you learn to still the mind and to go beyond the gravitational pull of the thoughts, because the thoughts they put you like in a jail. They are like really a gravitational field where you are stuck, and with all the inputs coming inside this field, you get trapped. And the only way really to go out there and to go and reach this escape velocity is that you need to go out of space. So you have to create this stillness and go beyond that, and basically be able then to access to a different field where you're not trapped. So in that sense, that's a technique we know here. Apparently, we all share, which is a very nice tool to be able to really to still the mind and access really not through the brain, which is processing and analyzing, but like any computer, it has its own limits. It has its own capacity, and it can be overloaded. So when you're able to go beyond that, beyond the field of the mind, and really grasp a wider field of consciousness, then I think you're able to really be guided. I think you can use different words or different approach, but at the end, it's always the same thing: is that there is a part within which gives you more clarity and which is more integrative in the way you're making decisions. So that's the kind of space you need to access, or you can access, when you still the mind.
So then if you were talking with a leader who has a big job and big decisions to make, would you counsel them to take a little time to, when they have big decisions? I mean, would you caution them to step away a little bit? In other words, how does someone who's used to analytical decision making and kind of being quick, because business is quick, right? The first one to get there. And yet in some ways this might feel a little counterintuitive. So what guidance would you give to someone who's not an experienced meditator, who's moving in this direction?
Yeah, so it's the more urgent the decision is required, I would say, the more urgent it is to pose. And I think it's every time you take decisions, where very important decisions, if you take them when you're in a rush, you're basically disconnecting yourself with this with your heart, where basically you can find really this inner guidance. So for me, the best advice is really to pause, still the mind, as I mentioned earlier, to really clear all this background noise and really tap into this inner space where you can really be aligned when you make the decision. There's no conflict, I would say, with the brain and the heart, in the way that the brain will be able basically to give you different options, explore different analysis. And you might come up with an analysis, as an example, for a partnership, where you think actually it's going to be a super profitable business, a super profitable partnership. It's going to take the company maybe to X amount of NPV or shareholder value, where the whole team is very enthusiastic about it. This is the best partner we can find, you would see. So on the paper, it is the perfect deal. But inside yourself, it's very noisy. Not the thoughts are not noisy, but inside the heart is so much upside down, because there is something that tells you, Amandine used the word intuition. Your heart, if you start trusting your heart, you start to feel that the more you base decisions on the guidance from the heart, the more you're able to empower your heart. Because even on the best deal, if you feel it's not the right deal, you don't do it. And I think the more you're able to take decisions based on that level of consciousness, based on your intuition, the more you trust your intuition, the more you trust your heart guidance, and then the more you basically make this shift between ego-led decision and or analytical-led decision to a more soft heart, inner guided, I would say, decisions. So that's for me the best advice as I can give, is really step back the ego, put it in the back seat, empower more and more your heart to really trust his decision, his judgment, his assessment. And for me, it's been really a change maker in my life since I've made that shift.
You know, this is so interesting. So you're talking about a bit of a dialogue between the head and the heart, it sounds like. And the last Future of Power dialogue we had, the man who we were talking with then said the same thing. He was on his way to a place, a property he was responsible for, where a terrorist had blown himself up, and his head is saying one thing and his heart saying something else. So this inner dialogue. And I want to ask you about something relative to the heart, because the heart also is a place where sadness can get stored. We can have sorrow in the heart, right? I mean, when something really upsetting has happened, or we can have worry in the heart or fear in the heart. How do we trust our heart if those things might be living there? What can we do? What happens? How do we
Yeah, like everything, yeah, you know, if you look at consciousness, so consciousness is basically there are so many levels there, and you can say that one level is emotion. So as you said, sorrow, sadness, they are part of us, they're part of life. A level deeper will be feeling. A level deeper will be perception. A level deeper would be intuition or inspiration. So when you go into the depth of the heart, from my experience, you're tapping into deeper and deeper levels of your being. And therefore you can still have all this range of depth of emotions, of feelings, of perception, but you're not identified as your emotion. You're not, it's not because I have a sad emotion that I'm a sad person. There is much more deeper. And for me, it's the heart in that level is the place to integrate. Again, back to sustainability, is where you can integrate everything and everyone in one space. It's just because the depth and it's just infinite. So in that way, I would say, I give you one more example in terms of the heart. If you when you lie, yeah. If you tell the truth, the heart is silence. Everything is fine, you're fully aligned. Yeah. When you start to lie, there needs to be a slight effort there. And the heart starts to make a lot of noise. If you're alert, your heart is starting to say it's pumping up. It's just the whole system is upside down, because the heart is there where to give you really this guidance to say, well, you're telling a lie right now. So you're not aligned anymore. So alignment for me comes really when a decision is made, is taken, then everything falls perfectly, mind, heart, everything is perfectly one. Everything is perfectly integrated. Everything is perfectly aligned. I mean, it's something for me which I've experienced many times, and I find it there. I find it in the heart for me. That's where it is.
Okay, this is we're into deep territory here, right? In all ways. So I want Amandine to weigh in here, and Nizar, you too. So Amandine, you are pretty articulate about this inner space, about feeling traumatized and yet hearing this soft voice and this sort of inner struggle. And Alain has just told us that the heart is quiet when we're telling the truth, but not so much when we're lying. I'm thinking of that children's story, Pinocchio, how as soon as he lies, right, the nose starts growing, it becomes obvious that something's gone off. So how do we care for our inner space? You know, that both of you are very, very busy. Same with Nizar, you know, lots, I'm sure before COVID, lots more flying and traveling, etc. And yet both of you are talking about some kind of real care about your inner space so that you can hear this intuition, so that you can hear this soft voice. So I'm interested in how you manage. So yes, there's trauma, there's sorrow, but somehow we get at this inner voice. Can you speak a little bit about how you care for this inner space so that you can hear this voice?
Thank you, Judy. Yeah, indeed, we have all busy life, and I do believe that we need to incarnate what we preach. So, for instance, working for United Nations, for peace in the world, who I am to work for peace if I'm not at peace with myself, if I am traumatized or depressed or anxious and burnout, I should better stay at home and not be in Central Africa, for instance, right now. So in order to incarnate peace from within and to give also, because if you don't give to yourself first, you give nothing at the end. So in order to give to myself, I have indeed practice, and I have 5 non-negotiable. And the first one is sleep well, drink well, eat enough, and I have any kind of spiritual practice, yoga, meditation, journaling, but also sport like swimming, running, dancing, that reconnect mind, body, and spirit. And take time in silence to do some type of healing or therapy. I also took the vows of non-violence when I was in Sevagram Ashram in India, the ashram of Gandhi, and the 5 precepts are you don't kill. So I'm vegetarian, so I don't encourage someone else to kill meat, for instance, to feed me. I don't lie, I don't steal, I don't take any intoxicant, and I don't have sexual misconduct in order for me to keep my peace of mind. And I really like what Alain shared with us about the fact that he got inspired to create the 18 SDG on peace and prosperity, because I feel exactly the same for United Nations. I believe that this organization should create also a department of wellness/mindfulness/consciousness. Like, for instance, at least for each UN staff member, incarnate the peace from within. And I have a great admiration for Dag Hammarskjöld. He was the second Secretary General of United Nations. He got the Peace Nobel Prize, he got killed in Africa. And he's the one who renovated the meditation room at the United Nations headquarters. And now it's just like a place you visit and nobody's meditate inside, but he's the one in his book Markings, which is his biography, encourage each UN staff member to really have time in stillness and silence to reflect on the mission for peace in the world.
And that silent room, that's dedicated to him, right? The silent room at the UN. Yeah.
Yeah, and the General Assembly as his name. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Now, so you take care of the body and you take care of the mind, and then you continue to revisit this inner space. This is how you care for this part of you, right? And so that was one of the questions that came from the audience. And then we have a question. Alain, you said that without a shift in consciousness, any change will fail. Can you give us an example where you faced an obstacle where you had to shift your consciousness? This is a question from the audience.
Well, you see, there are certain shifts of consciousness which take place on their own, because life is offering opportunities to do these shifts of consciousness. So, for instance, when you have a very close friend or a very close family member who's passing away, your relationship to death is changing. So that shift of consciousness is happening in your relationship with death, because you're experiencing death in a very close way. There are certain meetings in life which also create shifts of consciousness, because certain people are touching your heart, like the stories with Amandine, for instance. They make you very humble, because you it's one thing to see this on the TV, it's another thing to live it. And that experience of another person can touch your heart so deeply that it creates that shift of consciousness. So there are certain things in life, certain meetings, certain encounters, certain events where your consciousness is evolving naturally on its own. And I think everyone is going through that. And certain things where you have the power to realize, be the owner of your shift of consciousness. And for me, it happens, it's not something, it happens every single day, every time I meditate. You know, I can give you so many examples where, you know, you're in an airport and you're very tired, you've spent 10 hours on video conference calls, you had 10 meetings during the day as a whether you're an employee or an executive or whatever, you've basically worked the whole day very hard. It's 9 p.m. in the evening, you're completely exhausted, you have nothing, no juice left, nothing. And your consciousness is completely shrinked, because it's just shrinked around your tiredness, your fact you're completely exhausted, and you're like, you feel completely trapped. And sometimes, I mean, actually every time I've been able to meditate even 5-10 minutes, even in the middle of an airport at 9 p.m. That ability to really suddenly realize I'm not just that tiredness. I'm not just that clouds of thoughts, which is doubtful and exhaustion and all this. Suddenly you leave that space and you realize there's much more than that and much more than that. And that shift of consciousness happens so many times, I think, for people who are practicing any kind of approach, I would say, around that, has made that experience. And it's really around who am I? And that defines how your consciousness is shrinking or expanding. And that shift of consciousness is happening every time you do a practice, which is focused on expanding consciousness. So I think that's the best example I can offer, is more around using tools to be proactive and owner of moving from just a small ego, self-centered person to being much more than that. Yeah.
So when you ask, who am I? One answer to that is sort of a small I. I'm my tiredness. Is that what
Yes.
you're saying?
Yes,
And then
exactly.
another answer to that is I'm sort of a transcendent I. I am, my
Yes.
tiredness is a part of it, my sorrow is a part of it, but there's something deeper and wiser, and that's what you're tapping into. That's what you're saying,
Yes.
yeah?
Yeah,
That's
and suddenly the shift happens. Suddenly the shift happens even after 5 minutes, where you're not exhausted anymore, and you're completely in a moment of epiphany, because you say, 5 minutes ago I was an exhausted person, filled with emotions, completely trapped there in a cloud of thoughts, and I have so many problems, so many things happen today, I have so many things to do tomorrow. You're in that state. And then just 5 minutes of that, and then suddenly as if it was never there, as if it was not you. So that shift of consciousness is what you didn't change. I mean, you're still there, but you realize you're not just that, and that makes such a difference. I mean, it's
So Alain, isn't this the real meaning of renewable energy?
yes, yes. It is infinite for sure as well. Like solar resources and wind resources are infinite. And the more you use them, the beauty of it, and you're right, it's a very good parallelism, is that it's not when you use the sun for producing energy, you don't waste the sun. The same way, when you use your consciousness, when you use your inner space, your inner resources, you don't diminish that resources, you're actually increasing it, because you're giving it more power, you're giving it more space, you're giving it more importance, and therefore it's absolutely renewable energy production. Yeah.
So Nizar, I want to ask you something that's come in. Being a leader, says the questioner, entails the ability to deal with conflicting views. How does your conscious leadership style deal with conflicting views?
I think this is again where your inner self comes. I think that decision making is easier. I think that there's a third answer to who am I? And that answer is that I am a soul. And I think that we practice this a lot, that we go into soul consciousness. And I think that that helps us so much to make decisions which are right, which are correct, which are not influenced by body consciousness. And I think that I practice this a lot. I think that we also have this practice, which I like both Amandine and Alain are doing, which is that we practice meditation. We do it at 4 in the morning and 7 in the evening. And that is the practice that we do, which keeps you focused on what's important, always. So I think that when conflict happens, and it's bound to happen, and it happens every day, and I think that it becomes easier and easier for us to make the right decisions when we are connected. And I mean by connected to soul and supreme soul. I think that that's quite important. I do this a lot. I connect whenever I have the opportunity myself to my soul, me, the soul, and the supreme soul.
You know, what I love about what all three of you are saying is I feel like we're in a time, and maybe especially during COVID, when there is a lot of fatigue and there is a lot of kind of tiredness of the heart and tiredness of the mind. And what you're all talking about is sort of the inner workings of resilience. Sort of what do you actually do when you have to get up and go again into a situation that's really fatiguing? And what I love about where all three of you are from very different sources, different inspirations, different role models, etc., is you all have landed in this place where there is this sort of deep inner truth, this inner being that you can tap into, and that changes everything. It's a different voice. It opens up your intuitive capacity. It's really interesting for this time. I mean, it would always be useful, but right now I think people are very fatigued. So I thought what we might do is actually do a few minutes of meditation. We've responded to the questions that have come in. You all have been brilliant. So what I'd like to do is just to invite everyone to first get your body comfortable. Make sure your spine is straight. Make sure your neck is over your spine. Your feet are on the floor or they're folded under you. And whatever urgency is out there, for now, just allow it to be. And invite the mind to become quiet. Slowing the speed of your thoughts. Allow the mind to become still. Just the cadence of your breath in the background. And allow peace to emerge in the mind. There is nothing to worry about. Everything will be okay. Now become aware of your heart. And knowing that the heart can harbor fear or sorrow, allow those energies to leave the heart and move into the deeper place in your heart. Allow your natural love and kindness to fill the heart. And then to move out beyond the heart, flowing out to your body, and then beyond the body, to the room you're in, to those you know and love. And then out beyond that, the current of your love, your kindness to those you don't know, to the natural world, the oceans, the sky, until your unlimited love is embracing the whole world. Now finally, allow your attention to move to the place behind the eyes. This is sometimes known as the third eye or the seat of the soul. So experience yourself there as pure energy, a sparkling star, an eternal spark of life. Unlimited in the good that you are, and unlimited in the good you can do. Experience yourself as kind, as loving, as compassionate, and as powerful. And understand the good you can create with your pure feelings and your good wishes. And from this place, the soul can be in touch with the divine. And now, keeping all of this stillness and love and goodness of the past few minutes, return your attention to this moment and to the world that needs you so urgently. Om Shanti. Nizar.
Thank you, Judy. Thank you for those last few minutes. And I want to take this opportunity also to thank my two wonderful guests. You have been absolutely fantastic. You spoke from the heart. And in this world, these days, that's rare that we can get people to speak straight from the heart. And what you had to say is useful to every human being. And right now, situations in the world is such that we all need to be powerful from within. Now you know the answer to the future power. You know what that power is. That is the inner power that we are talking about. All of us need to develop that power. Whichever way we can, we need to develop. We will certainly try and have more of these kind of meetings. This is as I said earlier on, is our 71st meeting. And we will have one of these every couple of months. And we will certainly invite you. The other thing is that you might have more questions that you did not want to or could not ask today. You think about what we have talked about today, and we ask you to get in touch with us. If you want to learn meditation and you have questions of any kind, you write to us on this website, enlightened at Future Power, and we will respond to that. We will even teach you meditation, and we will give you advice as to where you can go if you don't want to do it online. But we will be happy to answer your questions. This is not a commercial break. You will not be asked for any money. So don't worry, you can be as open as you want. And this is one of the things that we want to do, and we will do with pleasure. Thank you for all of you for attending this program, which we appreciate very much. We hope that you are taking something valuable with you, that you will try and work on or practice and make your life a little bit more elevated. Once again, thank you to Judy for being an excellent facilitator. And thank you again to Amandine and to Alain for being such good guests. Thanks to all of you. Have a very good day or good evening, depending on wherever you are. Thanks again. Om Shanti, to repeat what Judy is saying, which means have a peaceful life. Okay, what do we do? We just disconnect. We are waiting for our technical guys. Thank you again for the technical people as well.